Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this video, we're going to be reviewing Wonder Woman. Now, this movie is supposed to be the movie to restore faith in the DC Extended Universe, and the big question is going to be, did it do it? I think so. I think this movie was successful in two ways. One, in that it did what it was supposed to do for itself, and in that it did help the overall DC universe. It has been kind of floundering. I mean, they're obviously making money at the box office, but if you're only making money and people aren't liking the movies, eventually that's going to stop working. So you need to get people to like the movies, and this is the first one where I think, now I haven't read the reviews, I've heard people say that it's doing really well, but I haven't checked any sort of outside source yet. I would bet that this movie is getting a really good score from both viewers and from critics. It just works really well. Now, it is an origin story, so it does have some of the inherent problems of an origin story, but it works nicely. I can imagine people are going to be comparing this very heavily to Captain America, but for me, it was kind of like Captain America and Thor had a baby. The whole wartime setting was very reminiscent of Captain America, and then the whole godlike setting was very reminiscent of Thor. And they were both origin movies, and they both did well. I think they had quite a few missteps in a lot of ways. This movie doesn't seem to have quite so many, so I think in that regard, it's pretty good. It's probably one of the better origin stories for any of the comic book characters that we've seen. I still think Iron Man probably takes the cake on that one, but this is a really good one. It does a really good job for Wonder Woman, and it does a good job setting us up for the rest of the DC EU. I don't like that, the DC Extended Universe. It sounds weird. MCU sounds better, and I'm not even like a Marvel person, but whatever. Let's talk about this movie. First, I want to point out I won't be doing any spoilers until the very end, so you're welcome to watch, and then once I tell you I'm going to talk about spoilers, then you can go watch the movie and come back and watch the end of the video later. The first thing I want to talk about is the writing. Some of the DC movies have not had the best of writing. We've had some pretty weird scenes, some weird motives, some weird dialogue, and just all around Martha moments. It hasn't been great. This movie, on the other hand, I think what helps this movie is that they don't try to do too much. It works very well. The writing is very succinct, very clean, very cohesive. There's not a whole lot of extra stuff. There's not a ton of exposition. It's just enough to keep the movie going, and then the rest is dialogue that's actually relevant to the movie rather than telling the audience what's happening or what's going to happen. Instead of telling us, they show us. And that's kind of important both in action movies or comic book based movies, I guess you could say, since that's kind of like a genre now rather than action or whatever. So I think that's a good thing. They're not just wasting our time with these crazy monologues and things like that. So it works nicely. I was very pleased with it. All the dialogue seems pretty natural, even though back when I did the trailer breakdown for this movie, when it very first started showing stuff, I said it seems a little awkward. It seems like they're going to try to make Chris Pine like this funny guy, and it's not going to work, and it's going to be weird. It wasn't like that. The way they cut up the trailer wasn't really fair to how the movie played out. There were funny moments, not necessarily laugh out loud, but you could appreciate the humor in it. But it felt natural. It felt good, so that was fine. There was no real issue that I can think of with the dialogue. Even when, you know, the whole scene where it's kind of like not half the movie, but a large portion, not just a scene where she comes to London and she's never been around an industrialized city like this before. She's never been around men. So there's this whole kind of like Tarzan thing going on where she has to adjust from her, not Tarzan necessarily primitive, but relatively primitive. I mean, we're talking a different type of place in Themyscira. So, you know, it's interesting and it's well handled. It's not super corny. It's clever, and they just did a really good job with that. So I really did like that. One good thing about this movie is that in that it's an origin story, they did a really good job of keeping it accurate to the comics. They didn't change too much, especially the big picture things. Obviously, they cut out a whole bunch of things where the different gods come down and talk to her and things like that, but it's pretty much accurate to the comics. So it's very faithful, and of course, Gal Gadot does a really good job as Wonder Woman anyway, so it feels very natural. It's not like they're forcing a new take or anything like that, so I like that a whole bunch. One problem I had with the writing, though, and this is kind of a big problem, it's It doesn't kill the movie to any serious extent because the rest of the movie is done very well, and it's very much about Wonder Woman rather than the villain. But that is the problem, in that the villain is terribly, terribly non-existent throughout most of the film. In fact, until a twist happens, which I can't really talk about because that's the spoiler part of this video, there's almost no villain. I mean, he exists, but almost not really. So it is a weak point, but they handle it well. I mean, they do a lot of the scenes where instead of she's fighting the main villain, she's fighting soldiers for the war type situation, much like Captain America did. Only his was way more Red Skull. This was way more just general infantry type people. So it was just different. It was handled well in that it worked without having a strong main villain, but a strong main villain would have made it better, I think. And I'll talk about more of that when we get to the end of the video. A very important thing for movies is the casting and then, of course, the acting. So let's talk about that briefly. It's not much to talk about because there's really only two people that matter. Gal Gadot and Chris Pine. They're the only ones that really make a difference. Anybody else could have been pretty much anybody else, and it wouldn't have changed much at all. So, of course, we know Gal is going to do a good job. She did a good job in BVS. She was one of the saving graces. I would have much preferred that to just be BVW without the V, just B and W. Batman and Wonder Woman. That would have been so much better. Anyway, she did a good job then. She continues to do a good job now. She carries the role just fine. I don't have any problem with how she looks. I think she's particularly attractive. And as both a normal person and as Wonder Woman, I think she looks good. Sure, maybe she could put on a little bit of muscle, just a little bit, but I don't think it's necessary. And realistically speaking, if you have somebody with supernatural abilities, superhuman strength that doesn't come from working out, they don't need big muscles. You don't need to have those bulging muscles if your strength does not come from your muscle mass. So I think it's perfectly fine. I think she looks good in the outfit, without the outfit. You know what I mean. It's good. I'm okay with it. And then Chris Pine. I was a little bit worried about this because you need Wonder Woman to be the star of her movie. So they needed to find the right person to play this role. And Chris Pine's like the perfect person. He's not a celebrity enough to take the spotlight, but he is enough to be a strong second, a strong number two. They had really good chemistry together, and it felt natural throughout the whole movie. And then the other guys did add to it, but again, they could have been anybody. So I think the casting and the acting both worked fine. No problems at all there. It is a comic book movie though, so we have to talk about the action. Was there enough of it? Was there too much of it? Was it any good? All of these things. So as far as the quantity goes, I'll say short of the spoiler stuff, it was good. There was a good amount of action. I do feel like it would have been better if the twist and the spoilery stuff happened sooner and then that was developed a little bit more, but I'm okay with it how it was. I just think it would have been more enjoyable to use that end stuff a little bit more, to make it be a little more weighty, to have some more oomph, rather than just having her fight a bunch of no-name German bad guys. Would have been good to, I think, introduce that twist a little bit sooner, but otherwise we're fine in terms of quantity. I think it was just the right amount. You often have a little bit less action in the origin stories, and that might be the case here, but it didn't feel like it dragged at any point. It felt pretty good, so I think that was all right. But the quality of the action is also important, so how was that? I think for the most part, it was really good. Although I think I enjoyed the scene in the beginning when she's still on Themyscira a little bit more than the later stuff, but that's because there's a whole bunch of essential Wonder Woman people doing Wonder Woman type things, then that was cool. But here's the thing, like, they gave her this kind of fighting style where she's jumping around and doing flips and slides and lots of acrobatics, and I don't mind that. I think that's cool. But they, I don't know. There's this thing that's going on with the action scenes in this where all too often they're slowing it down. They're using slow motion to show what's happening or to emphasize something, and it really loses its effect after, the first 10 times. So maybe some people are going to be fine with this, but for me personally, I would much rather to just have the scene play out with only very sparse slow motion. It just kind of it slows everything down. It takes you out of the action. So for me, I would have preferred less slow motion, but otherwise it was really good. I liked that. I guess you could also say the bullet deflection. I know that that's really important for Wonder Woman because it's one of the first things she did in the comics to make her Wonder Woman. but she does a lot of bullet deflecting with her bracers. So either they're going to explain that she's got speed like the Flash, or they're just going to let it go and be like, yeah, we just put it in there because it looked cool, which is fine. But she does do a lot of bullet deflect. Like if she's fighting somebody here and somebody's behind her, and she's able to deflect a lot of bullets. So it's not a big deal at all, but it's worth mentioning. So the action's pretty good, but we need to talk about the special effects because that's also a pretty big thing for superhero movies. So she's mostly not a special effects oriented character. She does do a lot of things that are superhuman. So they do have to do a lot of CGI person work, not like lots of explosions and things, though of course that exists. All of the general type of special effects stuff is really good. Explosions, backgrounds, all that kind of stuff is fine. But when they do the CGI Wonder Woman, or even the other Amazonians when they're back on Themyscira, it does look a little iffy. You know, it takes me back to the Matrix, the second Matrix movie, when they had Neo jumping around fighting all the Agent Smiths. You can tell when a person is CGI, especially when they're jumping around and moving around. It just looks off. Now, there's no real good way around that. You can't put somebody on wires for everything, so I get it. It's not a big deal, but it does look off. We have to talk about that. That is part of a review. It doesn't really take away from the movie too much, but there are a few scenes where you're like, that's definitely not a person, and it looks a little weird, but you get over it because the next scene is just as cool, and there is a person. They do seem to do a lot of practical special effects in terms of, not really special effects, but actor effects. I don't know what you call it. Stunts, I guess. So it's like special effects / stunts. It works fine. It's not a problem, but you will notice a few times where the CGI is a little clunky. Not too bad though. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about the spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled, you need to go away now. Go away, come back after you watch the movie, then you can talk about what we're going to talk about in this segment. And if you are staying to watch this portion of the video and you want to talk about it in the comment section below, please be discreet and post spoilers at the top, and then don't just be like, spoilers, Wonder Woman dies. That's not a thing, but don't do that, okay? Be respectful of everybody else who's watching. Although, wouldn't it be funny if they killed her too? Because why not? Let's just kill everybody in the DC movies. That'd be great. Except for Batman, because he's Batman. Okay, so, spoilers, the twist. She's after this main bad guy, who is the main bad guy for the Steve character. I can't think of his last name. Chris Pine's character. So she wants to kill him. She thinks Ares this guy is Ares, the god of war Ares, and she's got to kill him. That's her job. It turns out he's not, okay? Turns out the good guy who helped them is Ares, which is like pretty classic switcheroo. Like, oh, that good guy's actually the bad guy, and he's been plotting behind the scenes, which is, you know, it's very cliche. And most people probably figured it out right away. That guy's role was way too small for being such a recognizable actor. So I was like instantly thinking to myself, that guy's probably Ares. But even if you didn't, the plot twist is fine. It was handled well enough, so it's not a big deal, even though it's cliche. But it happens way too late in the film. I think. It's not that it's a bad thing, but it could have been a better thing if it happened sooner. And I only say that because Ares ends up being full-on Ares, not just a regular guy who's scheming. Like, he gets the armor and everything, and it becomes awesome. Like Wonder Woman versus Ares, head-to-head. He's the main bad guy for Wonder Woman for most of the comics. That's awesome. But it happens at the very end of the movie, and then he's gone. So, for me, the reason it's not as good as it could have been is they didn't utilize Ares well enough. He could have been a much bigger part, which would have made her be able to be a much bigger part, rather than completely origin story. She could have been origin story up to the midpoint, and then badass fighting Ares for the rest of it, and then Ares gets his time to shine, and she gets to do it also, rather than just in that last scene, which is cool, but again, Ares is gone pretty quick. I mean, he's like gone as far as we know, and that's that. So now who's she gonna fight? She just killed a god. Why would she have trouble doing anything else going forward? Are we just setting her up to be super powerful for Justice League? Because if she is, then she's gonna handle it no problem on her own. Forget everybody else. We'll see. I mean, maybe they have a plan. I'm hoping they have a plan. But if you start off by killing a god, you don't have much to go. I mean, that's it. There's not too much else to do. So we'll see how it goes. It wasn't a bad thing, but I think it maybe could have been better if they worked it a little differently. It's kind of like the whole Superman with Doomsday and dying at the end of VVS. you start off with that, you don't have too much else to do. So we're kind of running into that issue multiple times now. We'll see. We will see. But yeah, it was a very good movie, very strong overall. It did have a few hiccups here and there, but what movie doesn't? So it was definitely the best of the DC Extended Universe movies, but that's not saying that much. If you're the best of a bunch of things that aren't great, then you're just not necessarily that good. But this was pretty good. So I definitely recommend it. Go check it out if you haven't seen it. If you have, then let's talk about it in the comment section below. And that'll do it, guys. So thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. I have new videos up every single day. We talk about action figures, movies, TV shows, video games, all kinds of fun stuff. So make sure you come back for that. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, and I'll see you guys next time.